Welcome to Read Much. This is where I get to talk about books that I want to talk about. I don't usually join book clubs where people say they're going to read a book and then, I don't know, I guess they meet up at some point and discuss the book. But I just read books that I want to read. I don't need to be in a book club to be encouraged to read. Although, when I was a teenager, I was in the Book of the Month Club. I couldn't resist it. And they also added a paperback. It was called Quality Paperback Book Club. So, if you couldn't afford the books in hardback, you always had that least expensive paperback version. And for most of my childhood, book clubs, well, the Book of the Month Club was around. And not Essence, Ebony Magazine also had a book club. And in the Ebony's book club, of course, they had books on Black history. They came before Columbus, things by W.E.B. Du Bois, and those classic Black writers who existed in the early 20th century in the United States. So I've always been around books, and one of the reasons is because my dad, who was a junk man, he was the quintessential junk man. He used to clean out apartments and stuff, and a lot of times he would get sets of encyclopedias, and he would bring the encyclopedias home. And what could I do? There was nothing I could do except read them. And that's what I did. And especially the fact that we grew up without a TV in the house, that just left more time to read. And I read a lot. When I used to go to school and we had readers, I would take my reader home, and in a weekend I would read all the stories. I just read. So as I, got older, I kept up my habit of reading, and I was always paying attention to what was written, and reading book reviews. The New York Times book review was a good place to look for books. And in the 70s, I can remember some books that were popular. One book that was just crazy on the New York Times bestseller list was Sybil. Everybody knows Sybil. Everybody remembers that story about multiple personality disorder and how outrageous it was. And that thing with the multiple personality was so popular in the 70s that one of the famous soap operas that I must admit that I used to watch, One Life to Live, had a storyline with Nikki Smith, Vicky Lord and Nikki Smith, and it was a split personality situation, and it was riveting. It was. But yeah, so I imagine that came from the popularity of the book Sybil. But I've always been intrigued by titles of books. That's one of the things that usually captures my attention regarding books. And it really doesn't matter what it's about. If the title intrigues me, then I'm more than likely will read the book. Like a book that had a riveting title was The Bullfighter Checks Her Makeup. Yeah, The Bullfighter Checks Her Makeup by Susan Orleans is her name. And she's a very interesting writer. And that book is a series of essays that she wrote on a number of things that she experienced. Like, not only did she go to the running of the bulls in Spain, hence the title, but she also went to a Pentecostal revival, and there was some other things that she did in that book that she wrote essays about, and it's interesting. So it makes for a fascinating read. Another book that she wrote that's just riveting is the library book. And when I first saw the title, I was intrigued with the title. I was like, wow, the library book. I wonder what that's about. So in my mind, I thought it was a book about libraries around the world. So it was a book about beautiful libraries that you should go to, wherever they would look at it. So I did get the book. I read it. The book is not about libraries in the way that I thought. It's about the history of the library in the United States, and it's tied into the fact that on the day that it had a fire at the Central Library in LA, something cataclysmic had happened in another part of the world. So because of that cataclysmic event, the story of the fire at the Central Library was buried on page 14, I believe, is what she said. And while she's talking about the fire, the history of the library, and she's talking about the fire and how the fire happened, and the fire happening is tied to the AIDS HIV epidemic, believe it or not. Yeah. So she got all those three things tied into this one story, and it's in the library book. So if I piqued your interest enough, then you can easily find it. I had that book. Well, what happened? Oh, I had the book from the library, and then I found it on a park bench or something, and then I lost it, and then I went and got it from the library again. And recently, when I was in New York City, I saw somebody on 125th Street in Harlem selling that book with his group of books that he was selling, and I meant to go back and get that book so that I would have it again. I would have the hard copy. Sometimes I do need to have books in hard copies, but I have had to stop collecting so many books because it just gets to be too much. And when you're moving and you have to box up books, it really is kind of stressful on your wrists. So I remember before I moved, I made a major move in Atlanta, and that was when I gave up all my hardback books. I had to. I think I took it to the Book Nook up there on North Jewett Hills or wherever it was, La Vista Road. But yeah, I had to stop getting hardback books. And so now we have Kindle, and I always go to libraries and, borrow thing, which is one of the most incredible inventions ever, to be able to go someplace and borrow books provided you bring them back. Recently, I read Never Flinch by Stephen King, and it's a long one. It's that thick. It was okay, but the reason why I felt compelled to read it is because he had a character in it named Sister Bessie, who was a blues singer. And I was like, oh, I gotta read that. And of course she was Black. And the other thing is that Stephen King doesn't usually bring a Black person into the story as early as he did in his books. So I was surprised at that. Yeah, I've read enough Stephen King to know. And Stephen King always has that Black Negro. No, not Black Negro, magical Negro. Sorry. Yeah, in his books. If you read, what's the one with Jack Nicholson? The Shining. There was a magical Negro in that. There was a magical Negro in The Stand. Yeah, so it's true. If you're a Stephen King fan, then you know that to be true. So he brought this character out really early in the story, like the first chapter. I was like, ooh, that's a switch. I'll be paying attention. Yeah. So I do read, my favorite types of books are biographies, autobiographies, and political books. Dark Money is one of my favorite books that I've read about I think it's the hidden billionaire behind the rise of the radical right. That's the subtitle for Dark Money. So yeah, I'll read a book. And Dark Money is very, very, it's riveting, it's interesting. And one of the things about that book, while the author was writing that book, and they talk about it throughout the story, how the right, radical right, they're steadily trying to debunk everything she's writing about. I don't know how she did it, but she was able to have everything proven, and she had the proof for it, so they couldn't come back and charge her with libel or defamation. She had the source. I remember seeing her in on that Frontline episode called Money, Power, and Wall Street, and she was one of the people they talked to. And yeah, she's a brilliant writer. So they wasn't able to say that she said anything wrong that was written in Dark Money, and Dark Money needs to be read by more people. So those are some of the books I like to read. I occasionally will read fiction, but mostly I appreciate nonfiction because nonfiction is true. Nonfiction is the truth, but I do have the ability to ascertain truth from lies. Yeah. So yeah, I read a lot. I can't help it. Always reading a book. Like I think currently I have a couple of books I'm currently reading. One is that Faces at the Bottom of the Pail. No, Faces at the Bottom of the Well. Yes, and it's about racism. Yes, systemic racism and how it'll never end. Yes, so that's a fascinating read. Another book that I read recently, and I had heard about this book long time ago. Must have been in the 90s when I first heard of it. And it's called The ISIS Papers. No, not ISIS, the ISIS. The ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors by Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. And a lot of people know who she is. So I finally got to read the ISIS paper. Mind you, it's a theory, but when you read it, it makes so much sense. And I feel like something is a theory until it's been proven. It's as simple as that. So if you really want some good reading and something that'll really probably boggle your mind, the ISIS papers, the ISIS papers is way up there on books that should be read by all Black people. And of course, there are lots and lots of books. There will never ever be a shortage of books for people to read, specifically Black people. And if you don't know, Malcolm X said a long time ago, the best place to hide um, something from Black people is in a book. And that is one reason why I continue to read.